Hour 2 Overdrive continues, powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Jason Strudwick, Jonas Siegel. Leafs Panthers tonight. We got the Oilers in action down in New Jersey. Got a lot of games in the NHL. Ottawa at home against Boston. That's a big, big game tonight. Tampa's in action. Columbus at home against Vegas. So in terms of the East and, chasing wildcard spots, a lot of games on the line, and LA at home against Washington tonight in terms of what could happen in that Pacific Division. So Emily Kaplan of ESPN coming up here in a moment. And Emily was a part of Tradecentre, and I did a number of hits with Emily. And one thing she said, she was in Tampa, and we were talking about how the state of Florida has dominated the East now for 5 years. They've had a representative in the Cup final, 3 straight from Tampa and the last 2 from Florida. How they still collectively kind of feel like they don't get enough respect. And
what?
Well, and the argument, I'll ask her to, we'll flush it out with her, but I think the argument is, and it's one that they can't win, is that there's still more focus on the hockey markets, quote unquote, and the original 6 teams. And that's not going to change. You've had a great run, good for you, but you look at the Miami Heat, they've been a very successful team for a long time. They're not going to get the same amount of attention that the Lakers get, or the Celtics get, or even the Knicks get. It's just never going to happen. It doesn't matter. And I think it's even more pronounced in Florida. Yet, if they keep winning, it's impossible to look away from what Tampa and Florida do.
It's just never going to change. They just don't have the same.
Well, you can't catch the history. But let me throw this out. You guys, I'm curious how you guys would answer this. So if you look at it since the turn of the century, the state of Florida has 4 Stanley Cups. Tampa in 2004, Tampa back-to-back 2021, and then obviously the Panthers last year. Mm-hmm. Canada obviously has none. If we were to start today, for the next 75 years, up until the year 2100, who do you think will have more Stanley Cups, the state of Florida or the country of Canada? Over the next 75 years.
Do we get to look at roster projections for 2056?
What's your guess? I mean,
are the Leafs signing Marner? No, Cal, go
yes,
first.
We'll say yes. We'll say, and McDavid's going back to Edmonton. Two can play that game. You're gonna get McDavid for the rest of his career.
Okay, then for sure Canada. I think Canada. I mean, nothing lasts the same forever. And I love the history of hockey. I love the tradition. But I look at what's happening now, and Florida's been really strong, right, as you just outlined, and they're a good team. But eventually, those 2 teams won't be good anymore, right? Their players get older, they move on. That's just going to happen, right? Barkov's not going to play forever, nor are some of those good players in Tampa. But I think that in Canada, eventually, you're going to win a Stanley Cup. It's not, the NHL is going to be the next 1,000 years without a Canadian team winning a Stanley Cup. And I think when they do it, you'll start unloading a few here and there. Because right now, Jonas, I'd be interested to know what you think. I think that the talent on Canadian teams is as higher than it's ever been in quite a while. When I look at Winnipeg, Toronto, Edmonton, even Calgary's trying to find it. Montreal's young and up and coming. Vancouver, Ottawa, I think that there's teams that are up and coming. So I think eventually we're going to get it. Then once we do, when I say we, Canada, will start rolling.
Do you guys think there's a jinx?
No, I don't think there's a jinx, but it's been a long time, man.
Or a curse. I meant to say a curse.
That I can get on board with.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the difference?
That one I can get on board with.
See, change your language. Yeah.
Curse is you just play the victim, and you're like, "Well, we're cursed." It's just like an easy explanation, right? Where you don't have to go too deep into it. It's not that they just run their teams poorly; it's that there's a curse.
But he is right. Like you think of Toronto, they've never had this much talent as they have the last few years. Edmonton, it's since the Gretzky days, right?
Yeah.
It's Ottawa, I guess it's since.
But again, Tampa could match the talent on all of these teams. Florida can match the talent.
But there's 2 teams. He's right.
That's where the odds are that the 7 Canadian teams are going to outperform the 2 Florida. The fact that it's a question, though, speaks to the times and also speaks to how kind of embarrassing it is that it actually is a question.
FanDuel should do that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this.
It's a long
for the whole century, for the 21st century, and Florida's got a 4-0 lead. So you got 75 years. I know it's ridiculous, 75 more years. But Florida, in the 21st century, Florida versus Canada, it's 4-0 Florida. You think Canada will catch them over the next 75 years?
Chances.
I think it's Florida, man. I think it's
That's
Florida.
That's a crazy statement.
One a decade. It's been 32 years.
Yeah, but this is just right now. Like, what's it?
But what if Florida and
2060?
Tampa over the next 2 or 3 years could knock out another 1 or 2, and then they're up 5 or 6-0?
Who's running the Panthers in 2045?
Bill Zito's kid, whoever that is, Bill Zito Jr.
Roberto Luongo.
Or Roberto Luongo. Maybe Brian McCabe. Maybe Caber's there doing his thing. Right? It could be anybody.
Half head of hair.
Barely, man. Caber is holding on for dear life. Dear life. But I think the sunshine has helped him, actually. Because O asked for picks from him like every 3 months. Give us an update. How are we looking? And it's progressing. He looks great. He feels great. And he's a Stanley Cup champion now. It's a big part of the Panthers program. All right, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline, here's our good friend from ESPN. Here's Emily Kaplan. How you doing, Emily?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing well. I was referencing one of your comments from Tradecentre where you were down in Tampa and you said that, collectively the state of Florida, the Panthers and the Lightning still don't feel like they get enough love or attention or respect. And I'm curious, what would have to happen for them to reach a level of respect that they feel is warranted? Do they have to keep winning? Is it that the original 6 teams have to continue to lose? Is it even possible for them to be on the same level in terms of coverage and hype as these original 6 teams or the conventional hockey markets?
Oh, great questions all around. And I thought you were going to reference my Hayes as a fraud there.
No, I was going to get to that at the end, but we'll get to it.
I will say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, great. I think it's probably funny for you guys to hear because they're probably talked about the envy of the league in terms of, the model franchise they've built as a destination. They've won, X out of how many of the last cups and been to the last conference finals. But I think from their perspective, success can be measured in national TV appearances. And quite frankly, I cover both of those teams a good amount. Tampa, like our first year, we were covering them a ton, and I really haven't gone down there as much in the last couple of years. Florida's now starting to get more on our national TV schedule, but often we'll see them paired against an original 6 team. Like I know I have another trip to the Panthers coming up, but it's against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We often have them against the Bruins or even the Red Wings. I had them earlier this year. So I think they're just looking for more respect in that way. And then when it came to the outdoor games, both of those teams felt like we were in position where we could have held these a while ago, or these big league events where we're celebrating our market. And I know they've had all-star games, and drafts and things like that. But they just feel like for as successful as they've been, as big of a fan base as they've cultivated in their market, and really I've been to both those arenas, and those are rabid, really diehard hockey fans nationally or, maybe just across the league. They just deserve a little bit more respect.
Well, listen, they continuously win. They continuously compete. They make things interesting. Like what Florida's done over the last couple of weeks. Them bringing in, Brad Marchand on his own, I think completely overshadowed everything else that happened on Friday and leading up to the trade deadline.
Over Rantanen and Marner?
Here's why. Because, Rantanen, Marner's very exclusive to this market. And obviously in this market, the Marner story, supersedes everything. The Rantanen thing, though, there was a buildup is my point. Okay. And it's not necessarily that the Bruins traded him, Emily. It's that they traded him within the division to a team in Florida that's kind of punked the Bruins. They punked everybody the last couple of years. And there's a very good chance if you're a Bruin fan, you're going to watch a guy that you've loved for 15 years fit in so perfectly there and possibly win a Stanley Cup like 3 months after they trade him.
I'm completely with you. And again, from a U.S. perspective, that was the big splashy headline that emerged, even though, as you guys mentioned, there were plenty of other really intriguing and surprising trades that didn't happen that went down. I think the most interesting aspect of it to me was, as you said, they've punked this team, but this was their biggest rival, and they couldn't get their number. And Brad Marchand has had these battles, like the Spam Bennett in particular, and when he found out that it was going to get traded and, the contract negotiations, we don't have to relitigate it, but it didn't get to a point where both sides were comfortable. The Bruins were talking to other teams and had advanced conversations with other teams, I believe some in the Western Conference, and they ended up giving him the respect of saying, okay, you've made your point clear. You want to go to Florida. The fact that Brad wanted to go to Florida, I think speaks so much to Florida and the program and the culture that they've built that game recognizes game. And he's like, yes, I absolutely hated playing you guys against on the ice, but if I had an opportunity to play anywhere, those are the guys that I want to go to battle with, and I respect them so much. That's the most fascinating aspect of it to me.
Emily, it felt like Steve Stales, the general manager of the Senators, had a very targeted type of player or specific type of player he was targeting. Do you think that he added the right type of player and for what they needed to kind of round out their roster?
Yeah, I think so. I think scoring depth, I think, just anyone that could add to this group would have been positive, because I think that they've shown so many signs of life and progress, and they really are in control here in that cluttered Eastern Conference race where they've got a pretty cushy, lead here to secure one of those playoff spots. So I honestly feel like it was just anyone for the room of just saying like, hey guys, I believe in you, and I compare them to the Detroit Red Wings, who also are looking to get over that hump and have this really long playoff drought. And Steve Yzerman basically told his group, like, I don't really think we're quite there yet. And, I'll give you a little patchwork here and there. You guys can add a goalie, but we're going to ride with this group. And maybe next year is when we really take that jump with our prospects. So I think Ottawa, I like what they did. I know Ryan Donato is another player that I would have loved to see go there. I'd love to see Ryan Donato on a bunch of different teams. I'm calling guys from Chicago right now, but I understand why they kept him.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, I want to keep up this disrespect train. I love it. I think we should do a whole disrespect show. I think the team that we're kind of disrespecting, myself included, is Washington. Everyone kind of is like, well, there's no juggernaut, and like I'm one of those people. But like you look at them in the standings, and they're like way up there. No one expected them. Are we disrespecting them, or are we being respectful? I guess is the way to ask.
No, I think we are disrespecting their team just because Ovi gets so much of the spotlight right now. And, like, obviously, like, it's not that I want to take any spotlight away from Ovi. This is a record that so many of us thought never would be broken, unbreakable records in sports. Like, again, what's big in America? Everyone's talking about Ovi in this goal chase. But I cover a lot of Capitals games, and I think that Spencer Carbery is the brightest young mind in the game. I think that the way he connects with these players is so fascinating, the way he puts them in the best positions for success. And they're a team that didn't really need much at the deadline because they click on so many different cylinders. And, last year they scraped into the playoffs basically on the heads of their goaltending. Like, they couldn't buy a goal. And now, like, I cover Capitals games where they score 8 goals and Ovi doesn't have one of them. Alexei Protas is probably the guy that everyone's starting to understand now. But, like, Spencer Carbery has his fingerprints all over that kid's development. Like, he was with him in Hershey last year at the end of the year. He's like, look, I want to use you more. I want to use you in more situations. You've got to extend your shifts. You got to work on your conditioning. Now he comes back with that frame, and he's an absolute beast out there. Offensively, we see what he's doing. Defensively, I think his game is sound. Carbery told us earlier in this year that, like, in his film sessions, he has to be careful of how many Protas clips that he shows because the rest of the room is just, like, rolling their eyes like, okay, we get it. It's your favorite son. Like, calm down. All of this is to say, like, I just think they're an absolutely fantastic team. And we look at so many other teams that are trying to retool on the fly. No one has been able to do it as effectively as Washington has.
With Emily Kaplan of ESPN. And it feels like they've got kids coming too, right? They got Lane Hudson's brother who's on his way. They've got that Ryan Leonard kid who was a captain of the American team with the juniors. He's on his way. Like, they're loaded in terms of their farm system. Yet it feels as if other teams now, like, it's a copycat league, but that one in particular, Emily, I just don't think is that easy to copy. Like, I think the Bruins are going to try to do it now and retool on the fly. And you're going to hear this a lot, between now and probably July 1st when free agency opens. We're going to try to do what Washington did. But they took a lot of swings on guys. And it took them some time, right? Like, Dubois, one of the more significant ones. But Chychrun had to be available. They had to go get him. Strome was available. There's a guy Chicago probably looks back and goes, what are we doing here? And you consider how he stepped in and the way that he has performed and the way that he's played. Logan Thompson, they've turned over their goaltenders. They took a gamble on Carbery. Like, I just don't think it's something that can be replicated, I guess is what I'm getting to, is they've set this kind of pace for retooling on the fly, but I think it's completely unrealistic for other teams to even try to replicate it because everything has worked out and they've got a farm system that's going to replenish anyone they could lose in the next year or two.
Yeah, and I think the one aspect of it that, like, we haven't talked about, maybe this is the disrespectful part to talk about, but, like, they did get a little luck because they did have these big contracts of these guys like TJ Oshie and Nicholas Backstrom, and, they were able to kind of walk away with them because they're like, yeah, you're kind of unfit to play, and that definitely freed up some flexibility for them, and, it's good to see that Nicholas Backstrom and TJ Oshie are still in the D.C. area. I know Backstrom apparently is, like, an incredible coach for his kid. Like, his kid's team is sick. I think his kid is sick. I'd love to hear that. But because of that, they were able to, add veterans to their roster. talking to their GM, Chris Patrick, earlier in the year. I was like, okay, like, what's the common theme of all these guys you brought in? He was just like, their age. They just targeted guys in this mid-20s age range that were really good. But they also found, I think they did a really good job pro scouting. Like Dubois, for example, they were like, okay, like we were watching him for a while, and what we found was in LA, like when he got top assignments, he did better. He was just buried on the depth chart of their center depth. So like he wasn't getting to go up against these guys. So we knew if we put him in our system and we gave him like the top guy every night, like we had a feeling that we could empower him for success. And I think those are maybe some lessons that other teams can take from, just a right guy and the right opportunity.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, right? And you're right in bringing up a point of like players getting off the books, like right before they either run out of steam or they run into injury issues, and that happened with Backstrom, it happened with Oshie. And, sometimes those breaks just have to go your way. And then in other ways, you got teams that are going to manipulate the cap, and take advantage of it, not long term, but at least between now and game one of the playoffs. And we started this conversation talking about the state of Florida, and we got the Panthers in town playing the Leafs tonight. And Matthew Tkachuk's not going to be a part of this. But what is your understanding, Emily, or what do you think is going to happen with Tkachuk in particular come the playoffs when he can be activated again? Do you think he'll be ready come game one, or might he have to ease into it? What's your read on Matthew Tkachuk?
This was a hard one for me because they've been really secretive with information of like, if he even got surgery, where he's doing his rehab, when he's expected back on the ice. I know he's with the team right now in Toronto. I think maybe in large part because they were at the Hall of Fame, and they got to celebrate by, donating their stuff there. The one thing I do know about Matthew Tkachuk, and I'd say the same for Brady, is just like whenever he gets the green light and whenever he's cleared, it's just going to be like balls to the wall. Like there's just no other speed for those guys, especially if it's playoff time. And so I think that, the last official word we got was Bill Zito. Hopeful we'll see him in the playoffs. I get the sense that if he's there, like game one of the playoffs or whenever it is, like you're going to see an all-out effort from that guy, and an all-out from them is typically pretty effective.
Yeah, it's pretty effective. And I fully expect that to be the case.
You're just so envious, eh? You're just jealous of
Kachuk in Florida
and the move and the LTIR. You're just
it's pretty savvy stuff. Don't you think?
Got hurt. What do you want him to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get it, but that's not the first example of this, Jonas. Like Mark Stone did it, Kucherov did it, Kane did it. Like there's been, and those guys came off surgery. But how can you predict months out that you're not going to be ready 5 games to go, 10 games to go? It's very convenient that you might as well wait. I'm not downplaying the benefit of doing it, but like, is there a world where it's possible Tkachuk could play the last 2 or 3 regular season games?
So the doctor's like, actually, he's ready April 15th.
Well, they could ballpark it, but at this point, you're going to stay on long-term IR. Yeah. I mean, it's don't hate.
But how do you really tell with the groin, right?
Well, I guess he's going to have to test it out.
Still sore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess he's going to have to test it out.
Oh, I'm better. I woke up this morning. It was better. Like I don't know, the back. Whenever I hear back and groin, I'm always like, oh boy, this seems a little suspicious. Emily, am I off? Because it's not like a broken arm where I can take an X-ray of this bad boy.
Right.
Well, you're the one that played, so I'm going to defer to you here. I would just say the one thing is you don't think he wanted to be out there for the end of that USA-Canada game. Like, trust me, like he would play if he could. So I do believe it to be a pretty legitimate injury in that sense. But just exactly, except for being told it was a very severe lower body injury. I don't have any other specifics.
Yeah. No, and I'm not disputing he got hurt, Jonas. Like,
you're just saying the timing is very convenient?
Yeah. Well, it could be. Like, if he comes up flying game 1, would you be surprised by that? He may or may not, but if he does, your radar doesn't go off that, like, miraculously right on time. It was perfect.
I just don't know what you want it to do about it.
There's nothing you can do. I'm not blaming the Panthers or anything like that. You have no suspicion whatsoever. None. I guess
I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
It's a conspiracy theory, Jonas.
Let me phrase it this way. If the playoffs started April 9th, would he be in the first game?
As opposed to April 18th or whatever?
Question.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Probably.
If the answer is probably, then then there you go. Get on board with the conspiracy theories, Jonas. Figure it out. Join the crew here. Anyway. All right, Emily. Well, we appreciate you doing this. And when are you going to see Ray Ferraro again? I got to have words with, because he texted me right after you said Hayes a fraud up here on Tradecentre. Immediately, I heard my phone going. I'm like, I know it's Ray, and he's going to claim that he had nothing to do with it. And that's exactly what he did. Just such a weaselly move by him. Such a
Classic
weasel move.
Ray.
I know.
I travel with that man every weekend, and there's so many times he leads me wrong when he tries to recommend a restaurant or when he tells us we need to get to the airport 3 hours earlier. This is one instance, though. He was very clear with me, and I'm going to rat him out on the radio. Yeah. He said, if you say this, it will go over well. So let's talk offline on how we can get some retribution.
Okay, we will work that out. And it did play very well. In the studio with the audience, it played very well. So I guess he did not lead you astray on this one in particular.
For once.
Yeah, for once, exactly. Enjoy the games tonight. Thank you, Emily.
Appreciate you guys.
There's Emily Kaplan of ESPN joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Drive the built-in Canada fuel-efficient, fun-to-drive Toyota RAV4. Gas or hybrid models available. Visit mapletoyota.com. Yeah, big night in the NHL.
Do you guys remember Rodney Dangerfield?
Yeah, of course.
Well,
what are we, Doogie? And,
Doogie doesn't know that.
How would we not remember Rodney Dangerfield?
I think you need to do you need to create something with respect, the disrespect rankings or something.
That's actually a really good idea.
Rodney Dangerfield disrespect.
You know what I'm going to do?
You're going to tweak your list?
No, my pie chart next week will be on disrespect. I'm going to have
How are you going to do a pie chart with disrespect?
Well, I'm going to pick 4 or 5 teams, and I'm going to say this team gets 50% of the disrespect.
That's
this team
good.
gets
I like
20.
That. Sure.
Because the pie chart was a big hit, and I've been told it's mandatory it continues. So you missed that, Struddy. I had a pie chart on Monday.
Wow.
On Mitch Marner. You would have loved it. It was a Mitch Marner specific pie chart, right up your alley. And it's something I'm going to have to continue into next week. So I might do that.
Good.
But I don't know if Washington would be at the height of that list. Like, I don't know if they're at the top.
You don't think this season they're the most disrespected team?
Well, I mean, I think you got to separate regular season from playoff disrespect. Like in the playoffs, in the projection of what they could do come playoff time, then I would say that that's probably the case. But I don't think anyone's raining on the parade this year. Like, they've been great all year. The Ovi thing's an unbelievable story. You know, Protas showing up. Tom Wilson's having a career year. You know, there's a lot of different things that are going their way. Logan Thompson, him not being on Canada, I guess could feed to the whole disrespect thing. But I think people are putting respect on his name because he's played so well. I think in the playoffs, that's going to be a very different story. But, yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm not sure who else sticks out that doesn't get enough respect. I mean, there's only so much that can go around, right?
I might change that word and say overlooked. I think they're being overlooked.
That's good.
Okay.
You know, like because I think they're a good team, but are they a cup favorite? So I think we're overlooking them with how I'd phrase that group.
Yeah, because they'll be the favorites in their first round, right?
Yeah.
No matter who they play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like slight favorites, right? Like 55-45?
I think probably more than that, depending on.
I guess if it's like Columbus,
if they play Columbus or Detroit or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
I'd feel pretty good about that bet.
Yeah, I think if they played the Rangers, it would be scarier.
What about Boston?
Possibly because of their history, and you look at Swayman the way he played last year in the playoffs in that first round, in particular against the Leafs. That could scare you a little bit. Like on paper, they'll be a better team. They'll have home ice. They'll be favored, but the odds would fluctuate based on who they play. But maybe that speaks to it because it maybe shouldn't. Like if you're a juggernaut, right? Like it didn't affect Boston's odds 2 years ago when they played Florida. Like, and Florida was a team that during the year people kept thinking they should be better than this. And then they get into the playoffs back door. They barely got in, and yet no one gave them a chance to win.
Well, and wasn't that series really close too? Like it
was 3-1 at one point. The Bruins,
so like they kind of barely.
And it was in overtime in Game 5. Yeah, I think Reinhart scored in overtime in Boston, Game 5, and Marchand had a breakaway that game, I believe. The old Matt Fratton.
The Matt Fratton.
Do
you get that reference, Struddy?
Struddy won't get that.
Oh, I know, isn't he?
That's a Toronto.
That one. No, that is one that I would guess very few people would understand.
Every Leaf fan would understand what that means.
Of a certain age.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Like it's not like a Gretzky high stick reference.
No, it's not.
Like Matt Fratton breakaway, I think is even within the details of that game.
Yeah.
But like true Leaf fans that were on the edge watching that game every shift, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm sure people when they see him. He still gets asked about that.
You just couldn't slide one past Tuukka because it was 4-2, I think, at that point. I remember the score. Like Horton had scored to make it 4-2, and then he broke loose on a breakaway. And you're like, if it's 5-2, it's over.
Sure.
How pathetic is that?
Sad.
Like they're up 4-1, and you're like, just get it to 5-2, and there's no chance. Realistically, even if it was 5-2, the Bruins might have tied it up 1-6-5.
It was rocking in there.
It was quite something.
Yeah.
Matt Fratton breakaway. Marchand had the same opportunity Game 5 against Florida. Now the shoe's on the other foot or the skates on the other foot. Marchand, maybe, who knows? Maybe they play Boston in the first round. Leafs Panthers tonight. We'll get to my list. We got some Strutter duds I'm going to sneak in here as well. Specifically Leafs versus Oilers. All right, in terms of how you feel about their setup and going into the playoffs. So we'll get to that as well. Jonas is in here. Struddy's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, we'll get to our best bets powered by FanDuel later this afternoon. Pierre LeBrun still to come. Dustin Nielsen coming up as well on the Oilers, and where they're at is they're in the greater New York area for the next, I guess, 3 or 4 days. They got the Devils tonight. I've got a list that I'm going to get to here momentarily. This Vladimir Guerrero Jr. story is just never going to go away now, unless they broker a deal, which is possible. Would you hold out hope for that, Jones?
Yeah, when we were talking about it on Monday with who were we talking about on Monday? Steve
Phillips
was on, I think. And you think about it, if the Jays are offering $450, the equivalent present day value, and Vladdy wants $500, don't you have to get a deal? Like if it's $50 million over 14 years, isn't that like potatoes for them? Like,
but
do you have to do that?
Yes.
It's a lot if
like
it's like an
a lot of
overpay,
money.
but like they screwed it up. They waited too long.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's going to have to be the Jays now.
Yeah.
Although there should be pressure on both sides because
why?
Vladdy keeps telling everybody, I'm dying to be a Blue Jay for life.
Yeah. But
like
if
$450 million is really like you're going to
your life
uplift
is not
your
going to
life,
change for $500.
but it will change for $500 if you literally have to move somewhere else and play somewhere else and possibly not love it there or be uncomfortable there or whatever. You're still going to have the money, but that $50 million over 14 years, if you're miserable, and maybe he won't be. Maybe he goes somewhere else and he loves it. I don't know. Maybe he's got another team in mind.
But I guess if you can get the extra $50 million, get the extra $50 million.
Yeah, and
for sure.
And why shouldn't he get it? The Blue Jays have been throwing money at everyone every summer except him.
Yeah. That's his argument. That's his argument.
I think she's right, though. I don't think it's right. Like, I think when Tavares signed the Leafs, Marner and Matthews looked at him and said, we're better than this guy. We should get more than him. Like, that's how it works. As a player, that's the way they think.
Well, okay, but based on that logic, he shouldn't be getting this money then because he's not better than Shohei Ohtani. You know,
that's
like,
fair.
You know what I mean? And that's
but
what he's
not
asking
looking for that
Strud.
money.
Yeah, well, he is though.
He's
Strud.
looking for close. He's not looking for $700 million.
But
He's
the thing
for
is, the $700 million is very, very deceptive because it's deferrals. They're going to be paying him until like 2055 or something.
All right.
So like that's the thing is, yes, it's going to work out to 700, but this is what is so stupid about baseball and pro sports and money and contracts. Now it's not about the actual bold dollar anymore. It's present day value, right? Because now deferrals are a part of the process. The negotiation is present day value. And what he's looking at it as, he wants 500 present day value. The Ohtani deal was like 465 present day. So Vladdy is literally asking for more money than Shohei Ohtani in terms of present day value, which is an absurd ask and completely unreasonable. Yet, as you pointed out, Jonas, the Jays have put themselves in this spot, and Vladdy's under no obligation to do anything but play out the year. And if he leaves, he leaves. And maybe he leaves money on the table. Maybe he goes somewhere else next summer, doesn't have a great year. There's a gamble from there. But still, he can control his own destiny. I guess I'm answering the question that it is probably incumbent on the Jays to go to him and say, fine, here's the extra $50 million.
Yeah, it's like $3.5 million a year for 14.
Yeah, like put the ego aside. You've screwed this up.
Yeah,
you've now that it's leaked out that you were willing to offer him this much, means that you're actually trying to get it done. Mm-hmm. Like this wasn't some bogus. Well, we offered him $280 million, which means you didn't really try to get him, right? It was completely disingenuous, the offer. If these reports are true that they offered $450 million over 14 years, then you're in business with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But he didn't speak to the media today, and he's going to have to. He's going to have to. And I'm quite curious to see how this plays out with him because he's not a guy that, based on what I've seen out of him throughout his career, he's a happy-go-lucky guy. English is his second language. It can be a little bit awkward, but he can also use that as a way to, and go through my interpreter, and I'm going to answer how I'm going to answer. But this could get awkward for him. And it's never really been that awkward for Vladdy. Like it's never like the market and the media have never really poked at Vladdy. And I think it's reasonable to challenge him, even with everything you said, that he's an athlete and the money's there and Rodgers has it and they offered it to other guys. You keep saying you don't want to be a distraction and you want to stay here. 14 years, $450 million is a remarkable contract that could check both boxes. Why aren't you doing it if you're Vladimir Guerrero Jr.?
What do you think is a better path for the Jays? That, let's say 14,500, or trade him?
I think keeping him should be the higher priority.
Interesting.
Because, well, you got.
I guess I could
fans,
just make the case like if you could get back a bunch of really good futures.
You're not
futures are all gamble. I guess
They're
a year
all
left.
gambles. They're all gambles.
But like, where are you going with Vladdy? Like, this team is old.
Where are you going with the futures? He's 25.
Rebuild. They don't have a farm system. Like, you're starting over.
Okay, then
which you might have to do anyway.
Why would you keep any of these guys?
Maybe you don't. Maybe you trade everything and try to get futures and start again. Like, they have no farm system. Like, what is this team? And yeah, that's
okay.
I don't know if that's their best course. I'm just thinking about it out loud. But yeah, like their team is old.
I can reason with that, but then you can't be half pregnant. You have to do that. Then.
I agree.
Right.
Like it's not just Vladdy wants too much, so he's gone. It's if you're going scorched earth, then all of them have to go, and you've got to bottom out. And like they're not going to do that.
Right.
Like they've made that.
But it might just happen
clear.
anyway, right? Like a couple years from now.
But the thing is, with Vladdy's 25 years old. Like Vladdy, we just talked about the Capitals and retooling on the fly. You can do that with Vlad. You can go down both paths.
But they don't have you just said, like, Washington has a really good minor league system. The Jays don't have that.
They don't have
so when all these older players are shuffled out, like, what's coming? What's next?
Well, that's why you would probably try to keep Vladdy and keep Bo Bichette.
But to what end? I don't know. Like, I'm asking you, like, seriously, what are you trying to do?
Well, obviously they're trying to win, Jonas. But the point is, free agency comes up every year, and guys are going to filter in and filter out. You can have more money. You can make trades, and you have a draft every single year. You've got to replenish your farm system. You have to, but they haven't been drafting properly. That's what's costing them.
Yeah.
You don't trade picks in baseball.
But you could
they have their
trade
picks every
players
year.
for good prospects and retool. You're not into it. It's okay.
No,
I get it.
You could, Jonas. I get it. But again, you have to trade everybody almost. And even then, there's no guarantees. How many guys that they have right now would garner any team in the league's first and third prospect?
Well, Vladdy. Bichette would get you something.
Yeah.
Some of the
who else?
I guess you're turning over some of the pitchers too.
Yeah, like Scherzer be
Scherzer's
gone.
getting you nothing. He's not getting anything.
Scherzer's not getting anything. They owe him $15 million.
Rios, Gosman, those guys get you
Rios
something.
has got how many years left on his deal? 5 years at $80 million.
He's sticking around. Gosman doesn't have a lot left, I don't think.
I don't know what he's got left in the tank.
That's fair.
Bassett's
not
getting
anything
anything significant for.
Right,
Like you could get pieces for them. But
you're
not replenishing.
But you're also kind of making
system.
my point. Like, where are you going with this particular team?
Well,
do you think this team can win the World Series?
No, I don't. But they've got the chance to be a playoff team on the border. Like if everything breaks their way,
yeah,
they're not an awful team. They're not the White Sox or something like that.
No,
but listen, it's going to be a challenge.
But you're right.
And I don't trust the front office to do it either.
True.
That's a part of it.
And they picked their path. They signed Santander. Like they've picked.
Yeah,
and they didn't trade Vladdy before. When they should have.
Right, exactly. And listen, if you're a fan, like we're in the weeds because we talk about everything and we detail everything. The average fan is like, I like Vladdy. He's been here for 10 years. He's a good player, wants to be in Toronto, sign him. Like there's a marketing element to it as well. They've spent 10 years building this guy up as the face of the franchise.
True.
And now $50 million, if you believe the report, is enough to completely change the history of your team.
Yeah, stupid.
Like when you look at it that way, it's a lot of money. It's not my money. And the argument will be from ownership that you have a budget. Yes, you don't have a salary cap, but you got a budget. So if you're going to give that extra 50 to Vladdy, then that's 50 that's not going to go to someone else. So there is a line because you can't just say, well, just give it to him.
But
because
it's
what
50 over 14 years.
No, I know that. But
nothing.
Who's to say he doesn't? Let's say you close the gap and he goes, actually, I want 550.
Yeah, it's just like it's like 50.
But where do you draw the line
that's
where it's like
question.
you just give them the money?
Maybe the line for them was 450 and now
well, it sounds as if that's probably the case.
But then you just lose them. So cool, you win the negotiation, but you don't get the player.
That's why it's sticky right now.
But I'll say this: you cannot let him walk. You just can't. You have to get.
I'm with you, Struddy. Like,
you have
listen,
to trade him.
Vladdy, if you don't sign him, then you're going to have to trade him.
Well, we saw
100%.
this with Shohei. Like, remember the Angels were like, well, we're going to try to sign him. And, like, they were terrible. And then he's like, yeah, I'm not staying. And they got nothing. And
yeah, but what complicates that is this front office, the manager, they're all under so much heat.
Yeah.
Let's say he's having a great season. You know, they're in a playoff spot at the trade deadline. They're not going to trade him.
You're right.
They're not going to.
You'll be talking about that.
Of
But
course.
if he flips, if he leaves and you've got nothing, now it's years of rebuild, right?
Well,
like I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. And
I think you got to do it.
Their argument will be, well, all that money we were going to spend, and they're still spending. They're paying them like $29 million or whatever this year. Is they'll use that money to replenish the system and the team and bring in different pieces. You know, as long as ownership consistently is willing to spend a lot of money, and this owner has spent a lot of money. If Vladdy's deal comes off the books, Bichette's getting, what's he making? Bo's making $20 million, something like that. Scherzer's at 15. Like, Springer's an issue. George Springer, they're paying a lot of money. You look at his stats in the spring, they are horrendous. Like, I don't think he can hit anymore. Period.
Last year.
Yeah, he was awful last year. And the year before, he wasn't much better. Like, there's a real possibility here that Springer is not a guy that's even at replacement level in Major League Baseball. So I don't know what they're going to do with him, and it's a lot of money. But this story's not going anywhere. And as much as I want to hear from Vladdy, he's going to have to speak on it. Mark Shapiro should be speaking too. Like, if these leaks are coming out, and I think they're coming from the Jays, go out and speak on it. Like, if now we know the numbers, what Vladdy wants, term, the dollars, what the Jays were reportedly willing to offer, come out and speak. Like, don't run and hide.
You think?
Absolutely.
It doesn't
This is
really
the
work.
face of your team, and it's everyone's wondering what the hell is going on. Go out and answer some questions. You're down in Dunedin watching the team.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think I agree. You have to do it once, and then it's done. Like you've done it.
Right.
You know, at this time of the year. I think that's important to just face
It's just then you're airing some of your dirty laundry, and you're probably not going to actually say anything because like you can't really say
not.
like the tree living thing on whatever day that was, Sunday.
With Martin, yeah.
Didn't really like the damage control did not really contain the damage. It just kind of like was like, oh, okay.
But you understand why he came out. You know, he came out. In theory, he came out to protect his player.
But there was nothing he could say.
Well, he could have said something. He chose not to because that's the way he operates, the Leafs operate. But if he doesn't speak, it's a story also. Like, why aren't you speaking on this? Why aren't you answering on it? Okay. And I guess, you know, technically he didn't do that. But I just feel like it's easy for the player to consistently go out when the team is involved too. Like, if the player's playing poorly, that's on the player to speak on it. Mm-hmm. If the player did something stupid, like Aaron Ekblad, you go answer for it.
So you're saying if the manager's doing something stupid,
well,
should be
not stupid, but if you're involved in the story, and the Marner thing, Tree Living was, he asked him to waive. You're involved in that. You should go speak on it. Yeah. And I'm saying the same thing with Vladdy. You're involved in the negotiation. The reports are out that you offered something. Don't make him just speak on it. You get out there and speak because you're involved. Like, it's not, you know, if Vladdy goes 0 for 10 to start the year, Mark Shapiro doesn't go out and speak for him. No one expects him to. You speak, Vladdy. But Mark is directly involved in these reports that are out there.
Yeah.
That's my point.
That's fair.
Like, if the team is involved in whatever the story that's blowing up, you should have a responsibility to speak on it.
Confirm, yeah, we offered him $450.
Why not? They won't, but they could.
It just never works that way.
I know, but like they could do that.
You should have a round table. Just get both of them in here.
We've asked them a million times. You think Mark Shapiro's going to come on here and answer? That'd be great.
Yeah,
he's wide open door. If Mark wants to come on, Vladdy can come on too. Bring his interpreter.
The deal.
Yeah,
you got the deal done within 5 minutes of him sitting down.
You're right about that, Strud. We could just broker the deal. Bring Vladdy and Shapiro in here, and I will work this out for them.
$475, lock, meet in the middle.
He's the mediator.
I love that idea.
That's what I always do with my Facebook deals. I always meet in the middle.
Meet in the middle.
Facebook marketplace.
I love that plan.
That's a great idea for a segment. You should
meet in the middle.
You guys should do a segment where you play the role of one and then argue, and then you be the judge.
Okay. Meet in the middle.
Meet in the middle.
All right. We'll come back with my list. All right. I got 5 players playing on Canadian teams that have to be rock stars down the stretch for a variety of reasons. Pierre LeBrun coming up as well. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, so it's a Thursday, and Hayesy B's list has arrived. And the thing is with these lists is sometimes you have to kind of expand the reasoning and the circumstances to what the player is dealing with, right? Because their teams are in different situations. But I've come up with a list here. players on or skaters on Canadian teams that need to have a great stretch run leading up to the playoffs.
So
this
not including
does not include what they're going to do in the playoffs if they're even going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
But we're talking about a 5 to 6 week run here where it's important these players step up for a variety of reasons. All right? Is that straight? Everyone's with me on that?
With you.
Okay, at number 5, I have Evan Bouchard.
Ooh.
At number 5, Strud. Whipping boy out there in Edmonton, right? Hasn't had a great season, nowhere close to what he did last year. He's missing Ekholm. Ekholm hasn't obviously been healthy recently. But I think he's such an important piece. And it's not about getting this team into the playoffs. They're going to be in the playoffs. But Bouchard last year was so good down the stretch. And he elevated his game in the playoffs. And he plays with like kind of a low pulse. Strud, you know his game better than anybody. But I think Bouchard, he needs to show something before he gets to the playoffs. I think he's got to find his game because come playoff time, that's your number one defenseman, or certainly going to be on your top pairing. And I think he's integral to anything they're going to do in the playoffs. So I have Evan Bouchard at 5. Number 4, I have Austin Matthews. Now, Matthews and Bouchard in a similar category. Both teams going to the playoffs. Both teams, what this whole season represents is going to be based on how they all perform in the playoffs. But Matthews has not looked like himself all year. And what is different here is, and I guess Bouchard applies to an extent, the Oilers can catch Vegas, but the Leafs are right in the hunt of that 1 seed. And it's his first year as captain. I think tonight's a massive game for him. You're back home. You're supposed to be healthy. You haven't been scoring lately. You've got Florida in your building. You're the captain. That doesn't come up enough either. And maybe it's because the nature of the captaincy and the importance of it has been neutered a little bit, over the last decade or so. But I think he's got to show signs that he can knock off the rust and look like himself and be himself come playoff time. And he's got 18 games to do that.
I just don't know if it's rust. I just don't think he's healthy.
Whatever it is,
I don't think he's healthy.
Then you better show some health.
Yeah, like
compensate and find a way to be effective.
Yeah, well,
if
and
you
you look
unhealthy.
in this stretch, he's not scoring. He does have a lot of assists. Like he's still a very good player. It's just like you look to him to score, and he's not scoring. But like go to that Team USA, Team Canada final. Mm-hmm. He almost scored 3 or 4 times in overtime.
2 assists, great in overtime,
right? Great
opportunities. Yeah. So I got Matthews at 4. This one might surprise you guys, but I'm going to have to flush this one out.
Off the board, Adam Henrique.
No, Patrick Laine at 3. Patrick Laine at 3. Now the reason I say that is secondary scoring. I think is going to really be a factor for the Habs and whether or not they can get in. And they lost last night in overtime. They had a 4-2 lead. They blew it. But Slavkovsky's been playing better. Caulfield's scoring. That top line is going to perform, I think, for the Habs. I think in order for them to get in, and they're right there. Like, they could get in. This is a big, big stretch run. I think Laine is going to be integral. I think him adding secondary scoring, him getting that power play popping is huge for Montreal. Also, the other guys are young. Like, he's 9 years into the league. It's a resurgence of his career. The market has really gravitated to him. And I think he's got to score big goals, and he's got to elevate his game. And he can't fade the way he's faded at different times this year and different times in his career.
Yeah.
So I got Patrick Laine at 3.
That's spicy.
That one I bet you didn't see coming.
I was going over it in my head. Who is he going to have on this list? I did not have him.
Patrick Laine at 3.
That.
I got Brady Tkachuk at 2.
Oh.
Captain America. Look what he did at the Four Nations. Never played a playoff game. Captain of a team that is currently in a playoff spot. As important as Stützle is, now Cousins, Sanderson's been really good. Obviously, you need Ullmark, but goalies aren't involved in this. I look at Tkachuk, Struddy, and I think he's got to play the best hockey of his career just to get in, just to secure a spot. And he's playing really well. He scored, 30 seconds into the game or whatever the other night. He's healthy. Stützle's healthy. They look good. But I think this is kind of a legacy 6 weeks for Tkachuk. And I think he's got to be their best player, and he's got to be motivated. He's got to hit. He's got to score. He's got to keep his emotions in check, but also evoke whatever emotion is necessary to get them over the top. I got Brady Tkachuk at 2. All right? Number 1 on the list, players on Canadian teams, skaters on Canadian teams that need a great stretch run leading up to the playoffs. I've got Elias Pettersson at 1.
Wow.
Elias Pettersson, who was really good last night.
You left 1. Okay, go ahead.
He was really good last night. Well,
Yeah.
Here's the point, all right? That team can't score. They've really had struggles scoring.
Yeah.
He's the highest paid player on the team. Quinn Hughes is back. Hughes looks great every single night. Like Hughes, I know what I'm getting out of Quinn Hughes every night. Pettersson, the last 2 games, has come alive. He was really good last night. they can still make the playoffs. And it feels like Pettersson is the guy that can drag them there. Like they need Pettersson, and every market's fickle. Vancouver's no different. They will look past the first 65 games if you're a rock star the last 15 to 20 and you get us in. So I got Pettersson at 1. There's my list, Jonas. Go ahead. You have a chat. Who did I miss?
Who do you think you missed?
You can say Mitch Marner? Because of the contract? Contract is irrelevant the rest of this season. In the regular season.
It is.
It pops in the playoffs. Playoffs will have a different list.
It's just like if he didn't have, he's
been great though this year.
He's had a good, yeah.
That's the thing. Like he's been great this year.
I guess you could say, yeah, you're not really the Oilers guys like McDavid. Like
I was thinking McDavid, but again, McDavid's just going to plug along and get
and he's performing in the playoffs.
And you know what he's going to do in the playoffs. Exactly. Yeah. All right,
I love Pettersson at 1 because he's the one who could get traded based on how he plays. The other 4 aren't going anywhere, so I think he's feeling it.
Very good point too. Like he's got to perform maybe for his life in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And they need him. And you heard Quinn Hughes talk about him after the game. Like they know they need this guy. So every player's different. Every team's different on the list. But those are the 5 guys I've got my eyes on down the stretch. We'll add to that list into the next hour. Pierre LeBrun coming up. Best bet still to come as well. Leafs Panthers tonight. We're teeing that up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.